There's a fair amount of controversy for what printed Yu-Gi-Oh card in the game is the most broken, or a better way of saying it is the most powerful or the best card to ever be created. That's really hard to determine because you have to look at more what the card is capable of versus what it actually does. Not, of course, always, but like Painful Choice is a very good example of an incredibly powerful card. It doesn't net you anything, but the fact that you were able to kind of break a game mechanic initially at the beginning of the game, the deck is pretty solidified, and it kind of takes. It's hard to like search for things out of your deck or thin your deck, or get to your cards quickly and abuse them in various ways. Like if you put them in the graveyard, you can abuse them with revival spells. If you get them in your hand, you can abuse summons. If you banish them, some cards get some effects and so on and so forth. So the fact that you were able to break a game mechanic like that with Painful Choice is even if there was nothing good to do with it, it would still be in theory a very good card and one of. So that thought follows through with a lot of other cards, and that's more so how you have to evaluate a card's power by what it can do, not necessarily exactly what it is able to do right now. That does influence what is able to do right now. Does influence where it is on the Forbidden Limited list, and of course that will be a huge factor. Like I can't just because there's a card called, just because of Sangan, it searches any monster with 1500 attack or less. Like if there were none, of course Sangan wouldn't be bad, even though the concept of picking up your deck and just searching for a card would be great. Like conceptually, that's. I mean, the Medallion of the Ice Barrier is a good example because it picks. You have there's 20 ice barriers in Medallion. You can run 3 of it and just pick any ice barrier from your deck. The fact that theoretically that's a really 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 good card, but the problem is all ice barriers are really really bad. Fishborg Blaster was still around, the deck would actually be somewhat viable. You need Fishborg and Formula, but that's not the point. Um, so that's not. You have to look at multiple things when you look at how good a card is. It's not just the sheer power of it. Like Dark Arm Dragon is a phenomenal card where it's relatively costless and you just get to blow up 3 cards, but that's kind of all it does. So that's kind of irrelevant. Anyway, there are 75 current Forbidden cards in the TCG, and I did not put all of them in this bracket. I decided to omit Pot of Greed, Pot of Avarice, and Graceful Charity because those 3 cards are purely advantage cards and deck thinning. They, unlike something like Destiny Hero Disc Commander, it can't really be abused. It's just pure. Like Pot of Greed is a pure +1. Like it's theoretically can't beat that. Pot of Avarice it's worse early game, but it's amazing late game, and so like it's a +1. Graceful Charity is purely a deck thinner at no cost to you. Sans you have to actually discard 2 cards, but those can actually be like huge benefits for you. So I decided to omit those 3 cards, making my count down to 72, which is still 8 more than a 64-man bracket. So I decided to do the first round before we go into 60, like a preliminary round before you go into top 64 to find the best card. Keep in mind all this was randomized except for the first round of a few cards that I decided to put in preliminaries because I wanted to get rid of them and explain why. So as you can see here, these are 8 matches. The winner of these matches will be fed into the 64 at random. But let's go ahead and go through the matchups. The first one is Stream Dragon Rule of Droplets versus Metamorphosis. I mean, I could talk about why the Baby Dragon's really good because the Dragon Rules are really good. The recurable giant beat sticks that just won't die even if when they're in the graveyard, more or less an extension of your hand. And while sure it's technically a -1 to summon them by using one of the Baby Dragons like Stream, it's just nowhere near some of the broken potential that you have for other cards. Metamorphosis, while there is no Thousand Eyes Restrict, there are enough fusions that I really feel that Metamorphosis is just kind of a really scary card where you can turn. Cyber Twin, just basically a 1-card Cyber Twin Dragon is really good. But that's not the only thing that Metamorphosis can do. It's just a really scary card to have in the meta, and I'm very glad that card is banned. Anyway. So Metamorphosis wins in theory and practicality over Stream. The next pairing, the only 4 that I decided to put into these the preliminary round where the 4 baby dragons, just to eliminate them all. Disc Commander is a lot better than Lightning. Disc Commander is the most abusable draw power that's just completely unfair in every way, shape, and form. Like, that card is freaking good. So, obviously, that's going to just tear up the competition and beat a piddly -1 baby dragon, or sure it gets Lightning, or sure it gets a Tempest, but that doesn't compensate for the fact that Disc Commander is infinitely better. Machiora is paired up against Self-Destruct Button. Self-Destruct Button is more or less a troll card. Sure, it kind of creates unfair situations because you can infinitely just tie the game over and over and over again and then go to time and then like play Golden Ladybug or something and win. But that's not... I don't think that warrants it being more powerful than a card that allows you to activate traps from your hand. Which brings us to a card in conjunction that was just disgusting together. Exchange of the Spirit and Machiora. Exchange of the Spirit is going to blow Reactant out of the water completely. Exchange of the Spirit, for when you have 15 cards in your graveyard, you and your opponent switch graveyards and decks, which means your opponent just decks out because you can. There's a lot of strategies where you just very quickly, just mill your deck, and then you play exchange, and then your opponent doesn't have any cards left in deck when they draw. Well, they'll have one turn to kill you with like 34 cards in graveyard. Next card, Temple of the Kings. It's like Machiora. Victory Dragon, its effect is really hard to get off, and sure, it gains you 1 free win, but I guess it's tutorable by Equips Wyvern, but it's just not. It's not anywhere near the power, the ability to break a game mechanic like activate traps from your hand. Hell, there's that stupid Chick, the Dark Scorpion card, and Call of the Haunted. When Chicken is battle damage your opponent's life points, you get a bouncer spell or trap, so then you bounce Call, and then you play Call again to revive your Chick to attack for 1,000, and then you bounce Call again. Sure, that's just one example, but like being able to activate trap cards from your hand on your turn is really good. Confiscation versus Burner. The ability to look at your opponent's hand and discard a card is phenomenal. It's to an extent on par with Delinquent Duo because you actually get to look at your hand and pick out what card you need to pick out. Sure, Duo taking out 2 is kind of hard to beat, but Confiscation is going to beat something piddly like Burner. Then you have Diffusion versus Elma. Elma, sure, it's equip spell, so it gets power with Hidden Armory, but its effect is relatively lackluster. It's just a recurrent card in your hand. It's sure it creates some. There's like the Gearfried, Royal Magical Library, Butterfly Dragon, Elma loop. That's not really anything in comparison to Dimension Fusion. If banishing monsters wasn't a thing, then Diffusion may be worse. But still, in theory, the fact that it just summons 5 or up to 5 for the cheap of 2,000. Which is nothing in the long run. And then we have Delinquent Duo versus Trishula. While Delinquent Duo is technically a +1, you do not get to see your hand, nor do you get to choose what card you pick out of your hand. It's all random, and then your opponent actually gets to pick the second one. So, I mean, to be honest, that's not even that bad in some situations. It's a pretty terrible top deck, and the fact that Trishula is an extra deck card means it's never really going to be dead. Just its existence is better than Delinquent Duo's. So that's why Trishula wins in this battle. So, the first round, as I said, I didn't really stack anything in here. The only cards I put in here on purpose were Stream, Lightning, Reactant, and Burner, and I'm glad that I kind of got things like Self-Destruct Button out of the way and Victory Dragon. But, yeah. So these 8 winners will be fed into the round of 64, and then I'll have single elimination. From here on out, it's completely random, so I can't guarantee that the second best card is going to place second in this tournament. And keep in mind that a lot of these are my opinions, and they aren't grounded. I mean, I wouldn't like swear on my life that I think that X card is better than X literally every time, because some cards are going to be very good matchups, and it is comparing not even apples to oranges, because apples and oranges are both fruit. It'd be like more comparing like Necrophilia to like shoelaces. It's like, what? So, yeah, and I'm actually not going to buy you ice cream if you watch to this point, so joke's on you, John and Will.